Welcome back. As a Nobel Prize laureate, the outspoken Bush critic Krugman is now a member of a very exclusive club, but the choice has sparked criticism. It is but the latest in a series of Nobel Prizes that went to people highly critical of the current US administration.
The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided to award the Nobel Peace Prize for 2002 to Jimmy Carter.
I call upon the Peace Prize laureate for 2007, Al Gore, to come forward to receive the gold medal and the diploma.
The Nobel Prize Committee says they disregard everything except for the scientific merits. Many right-wing politicians would disagree. To them, the Nobels are politically motivated and maybe even ideologically driven. But are they? Just 3 weeks before the US presidential election, the choice is bound to stir up debate. But do the opinions of the Nobel Prize winners really matter? Krugman has been a political pundit for years, but will his views now have a greater impact on economic policies or the popularity rating of politicians? Joining us again are our guests in Stockholm, Professor Bertil Holmlund, in Sacramento, California, Professor David Anderson, and joining us now in London, Charlie Wolf is a conservative political commentator and has worked with Republicans abroad in the past. Welcome, gentlemen. Let me start by asking Mr. Charlie Wolf in London. Mr. Charlie Wolf, do you think that the choice or the award given to Krugman was politically motivated?
I'm not really sure at this point. It sounds like it was for work he did 10 years ago. If it was politically motivated, that's very disturbing, especially if it's an arm of the Swedish government or a group of people from another country trying to affect an American election. It's normally countries do not interfere in the internals politics of another country. You would never hear George Bush, for instance, as a sitting president, talking about a British domestic issue. So if that is the case, then I would find that highly disturbing, but I'm not quite sure on that.
Mr. Holmlund, we're not trying to judge a decision made by a respected body, which is the Royal Academy of Sciences and the committee that you chair. By why is everybody thinking that you are rewarding somebody who has been slapping President Bush in the face for the last decade?
As I said before, I think in academia this is not controversial really. It's clear that he has received the prize for his contributions to trade theory in the early 1970s and for his contributions to economic geography in the early 1990s, and that's absolutely clear. And you must realize that in the past there have also been laureates that have been highly controversial. Milton Friedman is certainly one example, but there are other examples. 4 years ago actually, Ed Prescott, who is an outspoken Republican, received the prize in economics. So we simply don't care about the candidates, politicians, and politics. And in many cases, we have no idea about the political views of a candidate.
Mr. Anderson, this is somebody who doesn't mind swears when it comes to President Bush. He has said he's a liar. He has engaged in degrading the government, undermining the law, the rule of law. He lies a lot. Do you think by choosing him, the Royal Academy shows a real agenda vis-à-vis the choices?
Well, first, I should point out that slapping President Bush is sort of a national pastime in the United States right now. But also another point needs to be made in sort of a distinction between the different types of Nobels that are given out. Nobel, when he wrote his will, he split the Nobel Prize between the Swedes and the Norwegians. The Swedish Nobel Committee is in charge of the academic prizes and have a long history of giving those prizes solely on academic merits. The Nobel Peace Prize, on the other hand, which I think the recent intro just had a few snippets about, the Nobel Peace Prize is given out by the Norwegian Nobel Committee, and the Peace Prize, by its very nature, is inherently political, and Obviously, the Norwegian Nobel Committee has a certain vision of what this world should look like and what peace means to them. It's not a conservative vision, and so conservatives are generally they're very critical of the Nobel Peace Prizes that are handed out. But I think it's important to make that distinction that these are two absolutely separate Nobel committees that do not work together.
Okay, and again, but let me this time include Mr. Charlie Wolf. This is not the first Bush critic who has been awarded the Nobel Prize. Carter in the past, Al Gore, both Democrats, and then Krugman, who is seen by some as liberal, by others as a progressive. What do you make of that?
Well, I sort of agree with the last guest. I think most people in the past have separated the economics prize, physics, etc. These are hard sciences. And actually, quite frankly, if you look at his work that they're citing from 10 years ago, and I'm not an economist, but from economists that I read, it's supposed to be very well-written stuff and very well thought-out stuff if you're talking about international trade. Actually, the irony is that what he talks about, international trade, etc., and very much promotes international trade. And now that's Paul Krugman, the economist. Paul Krugman, the columnist, seems to be a different guy, and it's sort of funny to see him supporting a Democratic Party and a Democratic candidate who are very much protectionists and very much against free trade. So
Mr. Wolf,
it's funny how the two don't seem to iron up together.
Sorry to interrupt you, but then you may have others saying that are Democrats more intellectual, smarter than Republicans? Al Gore, Jimmy Carter?
I don't know I don't know if they're necessarily more intellectual or what have you. Even that, though, is a point. You know, ultimately, I think from what you're looking at is how will this sway or not sway an election. And the person with the vote sitting in Iowa or in a battleground state is going to say, well, them Swedes or them Norwegians, they're a lot smarter than me. They see, you know, Yasser Arafat as a peacemaker. I see him as a terrorist. And, well, I guess they're a hell of a lot smarter than I am. And then they're going to go by their common sense as to how they decide the election. And I don't know if intellectualism is necessarily the be-all and end-all. Not that it's a bad thing when choosing a president.
Holman, let me go back again to you. Do you think that the predictions of Krugman's predictions of turmoil in East Asia and also about financial crisis in the West, and particularly in the US, bolstered his status among the jury?
Can you repeat that question, please? I didn't quite understand it.
All right. Do you think that the predictions, former predictions of Krugman of financial turmoil in East Asia and also turmoil in the financial crisis bolstered his status among you guys in the jury?
Not really, actually. It has to be said that he is an expert on international finance. So when he is talking about the current financial situation, he is actually really an expert, but we did not award him the prize for his contributions to international finance, although they are significant. They are not the reason for giving him the prize. As I said, those are for his contributions to trade theory and to economic geography.
All right. Mr. Anderson, this is somebody who has been very, very critical of the Republican Party and of the Republican Party's candidate, McCain. Do you think that his views could harm the chances of McCain?
Well, I think McCain is doing plenty on his own to harm his chances. I think, certainly what Krugman has done, he was one of the very first critics of the Bush administration, especially with regards to the war, who had a public platform as large as the New York Times. So as an opinion maker and as a public intellectual, he's played, I think, an important role in the United States in turning people's ideas and people's opinions about the Bush administration and the wisdom of sort of Republican rule and conservative thinking, and has really challenged those ideas. And so this will probably give him more of a platform to be able to do that. The fact that he's already a New York Times columnist means that he already pretty much has one of the largest platforms in the country. I
need to ask the same question to Mr. to Charlie Wolf.
Mr. Wolf, I was going to say I don't see this. Yeah, I was going to say I don't see this having a major effect. As Mr. Anderson, Professor Anderson has stated, he already has a pretty big platform, and those that follow Krugman, and those that don't. And I don't see that changing. You know, as far as the partisans in an election are concerned, David Anderson may be voting his way, I'll be voting mine. what's important is those people in the middle, those undecided voters, how they're going to vote. I don't think they're necessarily people that generally read Paul Krugman.
But then
Paul Krugman has been called sort of the Michael Moore of the columnist set.
So,
I mean, some
sorry
of the
to
ideas
interrupt
he
you
comes
there.
out, I think, are pretty intellectually challenged.
If I may interrupt you, yes, but then the Nobel Prize will definitely gain him more credence among people who would say, oh, this time I think we have to listen to him.
No, not necessarily, because they're going to see this as a sort of highfalutin economist, and you know, economists serve an important function, but as the old joke goes, you lay 100 of them together, you still won't come up with an opinion. You know, people are going to go and judge us on a lot of basics. And I think one of the things that disturbs me as you're going into this election, I see within Barack Obama and the Democrats a party that is still a high taxation party and one that wants to restrict free trade. And again, I'm not an economist, but I know enough history of the Great Depression to know those were the two things that sort of were the tipping point that caused the major crash that it was.
Okay.
And I think a lot of Americans will know that when it comes to tax. And Krugman and you know, his area of economics is not going to impact on people saying, well, do I really want my taxes going up right now when my job's on the line?
Okay, Mr. Holmland, given the reactions that have resulted from the choice of Krugman, do you think that you'll be very careful in the future when you choose somebody with political motivations or political affiliations?
I think we should try to keep politics and political affiliations outside our discussions. We have done that so far, and I think we should do that in the future. If we are going to check into the political preferences of candidates, we will be on a slippery slope, and we'll have to check if there is an election somewhere, and there are typically elections every year, and there are elections every second year in the US. So I think we should be continuing our current policy of keeping politics outside our discussions.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, we have to leave it there.
Can I just say to the guest from Sweden, the problem he has is...
Very briefly, please.
And I'm sure he's... I was going to say the problem he has is I'm sure he's done it with all the best intention in the world, but sometimes it's just that sort of patina, that you know, that ability to connect 2 and 2 and get 4, even though that may not be their aim. And I'm wondering if Krugman was a proper choice for this year. Maybe they should have waited.
Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen.
And chosen somebody else.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. We're in short of time. Bertil Holmland in Stockholm, Mr. Charlie Wolf in London, and David Anderson in Sacramento. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us, and thank you very much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Goodbye for now.